All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I've got some small changes. This is anticipation of the next set coming out, and I'll talk about basically the one card that I want from the next set more than any other card in the set, and then we'll get into some games. But there's also a conversation that I was hoping to have. It's been a little while since I posted. The last video actually that would have come up on my channel was done in collaboration with Brian Weissman on his channel. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you check it out. It was super fun and awesome. But in the meantime, I kind of wanted to talk about something that a friend of mine had brought up in conversation, which was it's a friend named Andrew, and he had talked to me about how he got interested in the more competitive side of this format and in the controlling aspect. He'd gotten interested in the channel and in these types of games as a result of watching the gameplay that we do here. And then he started getting into it and noticing his win rate rising, which was never a thing for him before. And then after he was getting a lot of wins, uh, he basically started getting gun shy, which was also a new phenomena for him, where he was concerned about losing, right? So the price of getting victories more consistently is that you start to feel it more when you lose. When you're expecting not to win and you don't win, it's it just meets your expectations and you carry on. When you're expecting not to win and you do win, it's a kind of a novelty and an exciting little thing. But once you get to a certain point, you start expecting to win, and then when you're expecting to win and you don't win, you feel the pain of it. And sometimes what that does is it creates a aversion to playing, because humans are we tend to avoid loss more than we cherish victories. Um, and so it's one of those deals where we tend to notice that the glass is half empty more often than we notice that the glass is half full. It's just a characteristic of human nature. And so he had asked me about, how do you deal with that, or if I even experience that myself, and I told him I absolutely do. And it's definitely true. So I thought I'd talk about it on the with y'all, just because it kind of brought to my mind the importance of having the conversation, and how um, I don't want to portray, as I'm doing these videos, that uh, it's all gravy. It's nothing but wins, and anything less than or a 95% win rate is unacceptable. And then, kind of how to deal with that and be able to play. Because the thing to keep in mind, essentially, with this format, and particularly with the style of play that I'm interested in promoting, and what I spend most of my time focusing on in this game, is a style of play that's completely inspired by my friend Brian. And it was basically something that he mentioned, decades ago, that stuck with me forever. And it was basically that he had designed the deck. The original concept of his deck, called the deck, was to create a vehicle where the skill of the pilot had more to do with the outcome than the luck of the draw. Basically, he wanted to feel like he was playing the game, and not like he was just flipping cards over and the game was playing itself, right? He wanted to feel like when he lost, it was his fault, and when he won, it was through his choices that were being made. And so when you start to think that way, I think that it makes the game a lot more interesting. And when you can extract that from the game, I think it makes the game a lot more fun, and it feels a lot better. There's a sense of pride and accomplishment that comes along with your wins. But along that, it's like every positive thing in life tends to have a negative side to it, and the opposite side of that coin is that with every loss, you feel like it's your fault, and with every loss, instead of feeling that pride and accomplishment, you feel uh, you can feel angry, resentful. It damages your ego, right? So in the same sense that you get the ego benefits from victory, when you feel that you're the reason why you won, you get kind of you take ego hit point damage, right? When you lose. And that can be really hard to deal with. And unfortunately, I would say that I am, I don't live up to the standard that I try to live up to all the time. And there are days when I tilt pretty hard, and I usually just have to take a time out, like myself, and just cool off because it's not appropriate. And it's one of those deals where, I'm cursing at the screen and I'm like, okay, I need to chill out, right? Like, not because it's just a game. That's not the attitude that I need to adopt, because I can be like, well, it's just a game, so I won't take it seriously. Well, why take anything serious in life? Like, nothing's actually that serious in life. So I don't want that attitude, but it's more of the case of, this isn't the type of response that I'm playing the game for, and this isn't who I want to be. And when I cool off, I remember that the reason that I'm playing the game is because of it's essentially what Brian said, all those decades ago. It's to get better. And so when I start losing, I have to remind myself that the reason I'm losing is because, first of all, there are two things that really I have to keep in mind under those conditions. And the first one is that we do not have control over everything, no matter how much control we put in our deck, no matter how much deck manipulation we put in our deck, no matter how much preparation we do, no matter how skilled of a pilot we are. The forces of the universe essentially uh, can decide the outcome of the game before it's played. And we have to accept that some games cannot be won. Some games are not, it's not a matter of fault, it's not a matter of blame. And our opponent, who might be gifted with uh, the nut draw, uh, with me getting mana screwed, with I ponder into no mana and I shuffle, and then I preordain into no mana, and then I tuck the cards and brainstorm into no mana and I die. And like, that's just going to happen sometimes. And it's not, my opponent is not a bad person for taking advantage of it. That's actually the correct response. That's what they should be doing. The goal of the game is to win the game and play another game. So their victory doesn't prevent me from playing another game. It's not like there's a moral, like if they defeat me, like in real life, if you were to kill me in real life, reduce my health to zero, that's a moral thing. But in a game, the reason we play games is because it removes that, and it allows us to challenge each other without actual real world consequences. So you have to keep in mind that frees my opponent to be as aggressive and disruptive and difficult for me to beat as possible. And if I want them to be any other way, I'm playing for the wrong reason. Like, I should not want them to go easy on me, because I'm not getting challenged correctly. And I don't really know how good I am, or how good my deck is, or how prepared I am, or even when I lose the games, like, even when, I'm trying to discover these things, but I'm also trying to improve upon these things. And so negative feedback is important feedback, right? So I should not be mad at my opponent, first off, for that happening, or fates and so forth. Like, you play the odds, but the odds sometimes play you, right? Like, it's just in that crazy example I gave with the ponders and stuff, the chances that actually happening are close to zero, but they are not zero. And it will happen. It has happened to somebody. It will happen again. It might happen to me, right? So I have to understand and accept that sometimes I get first turn mind twist you for 7, and sometimes I get 17 cards with never finding another mana source and just dying or whatever. And it's just something you have to deal with. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that is essentially related to that, which has to do with the losing thing, and it has to do with taking a step back, because at some point after you've been winning for a while, you start to get convinced, or you can. I certainly have fallen into this trap, so I don't want to talk about other people. I'll talk about me, right? Like, I sometimes get convinced of my own mastery of the game, to the point that I lose humility. It's okay to understand that you're really good at this game. It's okay to understand that you have a really good uh, deck that you're playing with. But some of the things that you've got to do definitely, and some of the things that I try to tell myself, traps I fall into, is to maintain that enough humility to realize that like maybe the deck's not as good as it needs to be, and maybe I'm not. Maybe when, for example, and I do this, I will take like a long break. I might take like a month off, and then I come and I pick the deck up and I start losing. Like I win a little and I lose a little, and it feels bad. And sometimes I'm like, oh well, forget this. This is no fun. And then I take another month off. Well, now I'm even worse when I come back, right? I'm even more out of practice. So like when I'm returning to play, this is not a deck that allows you to do well if you don't play it like over and over and over. This is not a pick it up and just play the deck and everything just flows correctly. And it doesn't matter if you're the guy who built it or part of the team that built it. It doesn't matter if you played it for 5 years and have a YouTube channel about playing this way. It doesn't matter at all. The only thing that will, bring out the best from the deck is is that combination of effort from the pilot and the deck, that harmony where you understand and know, what you're going to be doing. You need to kind of have an idea of what's going on roughly 3 turns before they happen. And you don't get there by picking the deck up cold and just starting to play, right? So you've got to be able to put the time in to get instinctive responses. And then if you want to get to the next level, you play a bunch and you get those instincts, and then you start looking for where you're falling into behavioral repetition traps, where like every time, where like for example, you've mulliganed to 4, you have Imperial Seal, you're going first, and you've got, land, Imperial Seal, and something completely preposterous that you can't cast, Tezzeret the Seeker or whatever, right? So you're sitting here like, okay, I can keep this. It's a 4 mana hand. So you go first turn, Imperial Seal for a, maybe not Tezzeret, maybe the last card in your hand's Prismatic Ending. So you've got land, uh, Imperial Seal, Prismatic Ending, right? So you go first turn, Imperial Seal. What do you go get? Well, 9 times out of 10, in fact, even more often than that, in your standard game where you haven't mulliganed before, the answer is Soul Ring or Mana Crypt. It's almost always Soul Ring, Mana Crypt. Occasionally it's Mishra's Workshop. Uh, but in general, like you're going for, occasionally it's Mox Diamond, but early on what you're trying to do is you're trying to pull ahead in mana and then reload your hand and prevent your opponent from doing the same, right? So if you play that game I just described on autopilot, you just, Imperial Seal, go get Soul Ring. Turn 2, you play your Soul Ring, and you're done. Or maybe you're Crypt, and you're done. And it's not correct. In that example, the correct card to go get is Dark Confidant. You Imperial Seal for Confidant. You play a land and you play Confidant. Why? Because you have like 2 cards in your hand. You need cards desperately, and it's the only way to get. It's the only chance you have of getting in the game, right? So stuff like that. Well, if you're playing on instinct, you'll miss it. And so there is a level up where you get to the point where you've played the deck enough that you can kind of play it on autopilot. And then there's a next level where you know when you need to turn autopilot off and take the manual controls and steer things in a different direction. So, um, and then once you get to doing all that and it all feels good and you're doing all that, you can, I've certainly fallen into the trap of feeling like any game I lose now is my fault and I should feel bad and I shouldn't lose any game. And that if I did lose a game and I cannot see anywhere that I made a mistake, right? Like first I look for a mistake. If I made a mistake, okay, I made that mistake. That's why I lost the game. I had mana leak, I tapped out, my opponent broke my back, and it's my fault. But um, barring that, I start tweaking the deck. I start going, okay, well, if only I had, my opponent played Sylvan Library on turn 2. I didn't have a turn 2 disenchant effect. Like I didn't have Prismatic Ending. So I lost the game. So now I need more disenchants. And you can start responding to what happened in the past by overcorrecting for the future. So all these are traps. All of these are things that can cause you to get frustrated. All these are things that can cause you not to want to play. And the only thing I could tell you really to overcome all them is that you have to accept that you're going to lose some games. You have to accept that some games cannot be won. You can't get mad at your opponent for beating you, however they beat you, no matter how cheesy or unfair it feels. And that's one of the things I've been dealing with recently, frustrated, frankly, by, in particular, a card that I haven't been too pleased to see again and again and again, which is the Gilded Lotus. Excuse me, not Gilded Lotus, the Jeweled Lotus, a card that I cannot use in Breya, so it doesn't. I cannot use it effectively in Breya to, it's a lotus petal for me to counteract when my opponent can use it against me. So if my opponent can use a Jeweled Lotus to great effect against me, I don't even play the card. And so it feels like my opponents are playing with Black Lotus and I'm not. It feels like they're playing type 1 and I'm not. When they play like turn 1 um, turn 1 Urza or something, right? Like it just feels so insanely unfair and not fun for me. And I've had it happen many times, and I have, fallen into this trap of being frustrated and just not wanting to play because it's just not fun. Um, but I think, or trying to overcorrect, like add a million Swords to Plowshares effects into the deck, even garbage ones, just anything. Put in a edict, put in terminate, put in like all this crazy stuff that, and then even when I do that, my opponent gets the nut draw and I don't get the answer right on time. Then I lose. And then of course I'm playing other games where my opponents are doing something completely different. I'm over prepared for this one scenario, and I lose games that I never should have lost because I've over prepared for the scenario that doesn't happen. So and sometimes in frustration, log out, don't play for a while. I'm going to try not to continue to fall into that trap, though. I've thought about it, and it's just not healthy way to play. It sucks the enjoyment out of the game, and I just thought I'd share that with you in case you are getting affected like by that as well. And of course, I wanted to respond to my friend's question months ago. Frankly, I just uh, had to think about how I wanted to respond first. So this video is about that, and it's about some gameplay. If you stuck through all this, awesome. But if you haven't, that's okay. Of course, I include the skip button in the comments, so you can jump right to the gameplay. So we're going to get into that here momentarily. I will say I teased that there's a card I'm looking forward to from the next set. I thought I'd give you that amount of time to let your mind think about it. If you've already looked at the next set, you might have an idea of what that card is. If not, it is a very humble but very, very needed card, and it is the replacement for this guy. So I've got Rogram Triome in here, which gives me 2 main colors and a splash. I have my primary colors blue, and my secondary colors are white and black, and red is a tertiary color. And I have this thing giving me a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. And thank goodness, but the I don't know what it's called, but the counterpart to this is being printed in the next set, and it'll be Island Plains Swamp, which means I'll be getting primary, secondary, secondary, which means that my just first of all, the only fetch land that won't get that is the red-green fetch. So Wooded Foothills is the only one that won't get the Island Plains Swamp. Every other fetch land will get it. So 9 times out of 10, if I have a fetch land, literally 9 times out of 10, I will be able to go get that right away. And then from there, I've got all of my, I can cast just about everything in my deck except for 1, 2, 3 cards. That's it. That land will allow me to play everything except for 3 cards, and in some way, or it'll assist in me playing everything except for 3 cards. And if you look at it, these two at least have either blue or black in them. So frankly, Vandal Blast is the only thing that doesn't get helped by me fetching that land. So 98 cards however many colored spells, it all gets benefited from that land. So it's going to be very, very nice to get that land into the deck. So they're also going to have, of course, the blue, black, red land will be printed. And then that would leave me with the possibility of running the tricolored, the triome for red, white, blue, red, blue, black, and white, blue, and blue, white, black, right? So the two side sort of combinations for the off colors and then the main color. The thing about it is 100% want it for the main. Um, and then the next consideration is, would I want to run multiples of the others? So this will just come out and become the blue, black, white land. And then the question is, do we want to bring the triome back? And do we want to bring the other triome black, the red, blue, black triome as well? And I think the answer is going to be no, but it's possible that that could be useful. But I think the answer is going to be no, because the early game is very important, and you really don't have you have time to get one typically, but getting two is pretty painful. And we also have Mystic Sanctuary, which sometimes you draw in your opening hand, and it does come into play tapped when you do that. So we're already at two come into play tapped lands, one that always does and one that sometimes does. Going beyond that seems pretty risky to me. But also, the mana base here is designed in such a way that every fetch land can fetch every color untapped with this mana base configuration, right? So every fetch can always get, if I draw a fetch land and I need to play, Imperial Seal, if I need to play Vandal Blast, I need to play Ponder, I need to play Portable Hole, it's turn one, I have any fetch, I can play whichever card I decide I need to play, because that fetch will always find a target. I have as many blue lands as possible, as many islands as possible. And I have additionally as many planes as possible. So as many islands as possible for Vedalken and Shackles, and because of course people attack islands because of cards like Mana Drain and such. And as many planes as possible because of Tithe, which is why the new red, blue, black, white land is going to be so fantastic, because it's an extra black producing land that also is a plains, also is an island. So these are the things that we want to keep in mind. And that's why the Rogram Triome actually made the cut, because it's an extra mountain that still meets the requirements of being a plains and an island whenever possible. So of the two that are coming, of the options beyond blue, black, white, the blue, black, red land is the least good, and then the Rogram Triome is the next best, and then the best is the Esper land. So what would they replace? Potentially the blue, black, red land could replace the worst land in the deck. The worst land in the deck is actually Badlands, and I I love the fact that it tells you it's worst land in the deck in the name. But it's the worst because it's not an island and it's not a plains. And anything that's an island or a plains is automatically better than anything that isn't. But if we were to place that with if we were to replace the red black land with the red black blue land that's coming from the next set, then I have no way to fetch an untapped mountain or untapped plains by certain fetch lands in that scenario. Um, and that could be a problem. So like if, for example, I use Wooded Foothills currently and I need to get white mana, I can get Plateau. If I need to get blue mana, which is what we hope to get most of the time, I can get the Volcanic. If I need to get red mana, obviously, once again, I can get Volcanic or Plateau or whatever. But if I need to get black mana, I can only get Badlands. So there's no other land I can get that's not going to come in that's a swamp. If I add the red, black, blue land and replace the Badlands, and I need this to get black mana, then I can get black mana, but it comes into play tapped. So I no longer get the ability to go Wooded Foothills into like a Vampiric Tutor or something. And that delay can cost me a game. So even though Badlands is the worst land in the deck, it still has a place and is necessary. In fact, all these lands are basically necessary. The only flex slots, realistically speaking, would be the basic island and the triome. So we can make this the Esper one, and then if we wanted, we could make this like either the blue, white, red, just for the extra white, or we could make it the black Badlands replacement, the red, black, blue. Um, Otherwise, there just isn't space. Every land has a purpose and really can't be cut. But I think cutting a basic island is a mistake because there are a lot of cards that will uh, the balance to how good they are is that your opponent gets to search a basic island. Basically, we're looking at kind of the abrupt decay style effects in black and green, and we're looking at the Path to Exile, and there's a few others, as Ghost Quarter and such. So really don't want to like have no basic islands and just completely reward the opponent for playing a card like that. We want to be able to punish it. And of course, basic island very minimally, very infrequently, but still possible to help us if we do get caught under um, a uh, a blood moon effect, right? Like it still can be kind of good to have a little bit of basic in there, but mostly it's just for Path to Exile type effects. If those effects did not exist, then the island could potentially be a candidate for replacement, but I think that it is not for that reason. But that's the card that's going to come from the next set. You will see also that I have added in um, that I've added in old cards that were previously in the deck. I added Mystical Teachings and I added Teferi. And the main reason is that I had these cheaper interactive cards in here. I had a Braid and I had I can't remember what the other one was. But I had a cheap early interaction to try to deal with the fast starts. And what I was running into was the fact that if they had the fast start and I drew the answer on time early, I could answer it, and that was very good. But if they didn't draw the fast start, the cheap interaction was not really where this deck wants to be because it's trying to develop mana quickly and then make big plays, and those were just small plays. And if the opponent did, that was if the opponent did not have the fast start. If they had the fast start and I didn't draw it, it didn't matter at all. But if I somehow got past my opponent's fast start and got into the mid game and then I drew it, it actually hurt me. So there were too many scenarios where, because I needed to draw like a power play and recover. So there were too many scenarios where um, that was occurring for my taste. And also, I just noticed that I missed Mystical Teachings quite a bit. This card is way better than I realized. Having played without it for a while, I didn't realize how much I would miss it, but I truly missed the card a lot. The ability to just instantly go get a solution is just of your choice, is just this deck's bread and butter, right? This is a deck that it's back to the original concept. We're trying to put the control in the hands of the pilot and allow you to solve problems dynamically rather than, like on the fly and anticipate them. And Mystical Teachings is a almost a case in point for exactly how you do that. Right, your opponent makes a play, and then you can respond. You can teachings in response to get force of will if you have to. You can teachings to go get like a vampiric tutor and then vampiric during your upkeep and then toxic deluge or Dak Faden or something to get out of the situation that you're in. And teachings just gives you that kind of flexibility um, that this deck is really designed to capitalize on. And then Teferi I added in because I really want one way to cheat, like untap my lands under a Winter Orb if I can find it. Previously I had Sword of Fire and Ice, but that equipment's been replaced by the reality chip. Future Sight beats Disrupting Scepter basically. Um, and then for a little while I had Urza back in, but then the problem with Urza is it's a conflict with the Abyss. So we don't really want. You can keep the artifact creature, but you lose the Urza, which is the whole point of playing him. And so Teferi actually works really well. It swims through the Abyss. It's not equipment that requires a creature to stay in play, which of course can be a little bit tricky with the Abyss. Incidentally, the Reality Chip and the Abyss wonderfully work together because Reality Chip is a artifact jellyfish, so he will just sit there and swim through the Abyss all day. And so basically, because I feel like the Abyss and Karn at 4 together create a very nice punish for specific opponents and types of things that people are trying to do, particularly certain commanders that are obnoxious if they stay in play. Uh, some commanders you can ignore. You can like play Breya and be like, well, you can't attack me. Your commander just sits there, you know, doing whatever it wants to, not doing what it wants to do, which is attack or whatever. And other commanders you can't. Um, they have to get off the board, and the ones that have to get off the board, Breya can sometimes take them off, but it's really nice. If you look at the Abyss's effect on a commander like that, it is essentially saving you 2 mana and 2 artifacts every time it procs. So that's a lot of value over time. So um, yeah. So anyway, and Teferi is basically in the what was the treachery slot. Treachery, a one-time shot to untap Underwind or Orb under certain conditions. Teferi always does it. Teferi's proactive. Treachery's reactive. Treachery's a great card. Teferi, of course, also makes up for the fact that I don't actually have a disenchant. I have Prismatic Ending and Portable Hole doing that job. But still, I don't have a disenchant. It's just one more like disenchant effect, one more planeswalker solution besides like Vindicate and so forth. So I feel pretty good about the build. I just cannot wait to switch out the Triumph. And if you stuck around for all that, we talked philosophy, deck tech. Let's take a look at some games. And yeah, this let me take a look at like say the last 7 days. I had some epic games against I'm a Donkey, who I believe is a someone who watches a channel. I believe he's a fan. Came in and on the you can see like death. I lose. I lose. I win. I lose. I win. I lose. Really getting crushed. I had a couple of win and loss here. I had a few wins and then a loss and a double loss here against Crows and Cliffhanger. And you can see here again, I had a loss and a win against I'm a Donkey, and then I had a series of 3 wins there, a loss, win and a loss. And so what? Here you can have a guy named Hoodman played me over and over trying to get the win. He managed to pull one out. But basically, what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that, especially when I'm advertising CEDH and my opponents are bringing it, the the uh, the win-loss ratio is not going to be what it is when you're just playing randoms. Like this deck is going to absolutely rip anybody apart that isn't coming with a game, right? But um, but even when that happens, first of all, don't get complacent. I've lost games that I have no business losing, and I've lost them just because I completely arrogantly took my opponent's deck for granted because it was clear that they were playing like a meme deck. Their commander is kind of garbage, and it's like joke. It's like 7 mana dragon that does dragon stuff, and you're just like, well, this isn't gonna fine, sure we can play, but and and then the problem is, of course, it turns out that that guy has like ritual plays this guy, goes off, and it happens only because I completely like tap out. I'm not playing defensively. I don't disrupt him. I'm trying to be nice. I'm making mistakes. And so what I'm getting at is give your opponent the courtesy of respect that you want when you're playing. Give them the best game that you can bring. Bring your best game for yourself and also for your opponent out of respect for them. And then, you know, understand that this is a good win-loss ratio, but this is not steamrolling. And so I thought I would run out some of the games. I have, yeah. So and I made some adjustments to the deck as well. You can see I had better results here than I did here. But I thought I'd run through some of the losses so you can see one. A deck that has given me tons of challenge. 2, you can see where I will try to look for where I've made mistakes, and I'll also point out if I think my opponent made mistakes. Maybe either they made a mistake and they didn't get punished for it, or because sometimes like you can make an error and it can be recoverable. You don't make the bet. Your opponent has Snapcaster Mage and you have Dark Confidant. You have Snapcaster Mage and a dark and a Dark Confidant in play, right? And your opponent bolts the Snapcaster and not the Confidant. That would be a 100% error, right? Like you can argue about whether or not certain plays are good, and some plays you just can't argue about. Some plays are 100% bad, you know. So if I see any of those, I'll point them out basically. You can see at the time I was running Cyclonic Rift. So my opponent's playing the Gitrog monster, and the Gitrog monster is one of those commanders that it basically, if it comes down, you're probably in big trouble, and if it stays in play, you probably lose. It's an insane card and mana engine. It just turns over cards and mana very fast, and that's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, we'll run through. So obviously I take a mulligan there. I'm not going to keep. You can see I had Urza in here. As I said, I was testing some stuff that just really didn't work out. But in hindsight, you know, uh, it after I got over the fact that I got stomped over and over with only the occasional win against I'm a Donkey, and I swallowed my ego, the deck got better, and I think the results from the next set of 3 that we play demonstrate that. But here you'll see me getting just crushed. But you know, it is what it is. An early smokestack, but actually having a Sensei's Divining Top can help tremendously with that. Going to get some more mana into play here. Going to take a look because there's a small chance that I might have, and I'm setting up now because there's a small chance that I might have, for example, a Mana Crypt on top. And if I had a Mana Crypt on top, I might tap that and play it and then play the Talisman of Dominance, and then just eat the Cavern of Souls as my sacrifice to the smokestack. Unfortunately, this just goes from bad to worse. You know, it's a turn 2 smokestack followed by Strip Mine Sphere of Resistance, right? So yeah, I'm pretty much hosed. Good thing I put the land on top there. I'm going to go ahead and fetch and then get some more mana into play and try to... So basically, if I can top deck a land here, I can get out of... If my opponent doesn't add a counter and I top deck a land, I can get out of the situation that I'm in, because I could have sacked this and then potentially drew a land and vindicate one of these cards. But he chose to add the land, so I was thinking, well, I mean, excuse me, he chose to add the counter to this much. So I was thinking, well, that's okay, but it's not great here. I actually might be able to sort of like accumulate a hand while he just... Well, basically we reset. Like eventually the whole board gets sacrificed off, and we essentially start over. So I'm sticking around for that. When it has removal, this is great for me because I'm already going with the accumulate your hand plan, and he's just down another card here, so I'm good with that. All right, so we'll go ahead and sack those off, hold the land. So now my opponent has to sacrifice 2 things, and unfortunately for me, doesn't get greedy and keep his smokestack. Basically, he played this perfectly. And that's very unfortunate for me because I was giving him lots of chances to screw up here. If, for example, he hadn't sacrificed the smokestack here, if he sacked the land, then I lose this, and then he would have lost. He would have been down to just 1 land, which is what I was very much hoping was going to happen. Instead, Gitrog monster comes down, and I mean, I've got almost nothing. I do have this Vindicate, and you can see I was trying out a lot of like test cards that just did not work. Unfortunately, Gitrog is now going to provide my opponent with card after card after card, strip mines that draw him cards, petrified fields that draw him cards, and I mean, there is hope here in theory, but in reality, there is not, right? Like I'm just sitting around waiting not to die. Then my opponent plays Opposition Agent, completely forces my hand here into the strip mine, and now I mean, this is just hopeless, right? My opponent just literally drawn up to 7 cards in hand, beating my face in, and I'm dead. So, you know, so it goes. All right, so we move into the second game here against I'm a Donkey. I do win. I don't know why or how I got the win here. We'll see. I don't remember these games. I just know what the outcome was, and just thought I thought I would go through them. So you can see I'm still playing with the same bad list. Oh, my opponent just said I mulliganed too much, and he just gave me the game. So I don't even know if that counts as a win. Frankly, it ends up affecting my ratio, but let's consider that a non-game. So here's essentially game 2, and I'm going to lose again. All right, so I mulligan into this, and I keep because I have Force of Will, I have Merchant Scroll, and I have Karn. And unfortunately, because I have Karn, I'm thinking that I won't force a will to mana crypt. This is a huge mistake. I went over this game with Brian after uh, like a few days later, and he said that was a tremendous screw up, and he's completely right. This problem here with this plan is I don't have fast mana, so unless I'm getting Karn down like the next turn or the turn after that, like immediately, basically, if I go land Soul Ring, then land Karn your crypt, that's one thing. But I'm not doing that, and so my opponent's going to get probably up to 4 turns with the Mana Crypt because I didn't force a will it before Karn can even come down. And that's if I hit land, 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 right? And if all that happens, my opponent will have generated 8 mana before I can even deal with it. He'll be 8 turns ahead. I've lost this game because I didn't force a will right there. And this is what I mean about, so here, I'm going to counter whatever it is my opponent got. Nope, because my opponent wisely got a strip mine, so I countered their Crucible. None of these plays actually possible without. And then Jeweled Lotus comes down, and my opponent's going to slam Gitrog, and at that point I've had enough, and I just concede. There's no coming back from this. Lotus was really bad here for me, but frankly, I already lost the game as soon as I didn't force a will to Mana Crypt. So let that be a lesson for those of you who are watching who might have thought that that was a good play, because it was not. All right, so I finally get a win in this marathon, and then I get another loss, and that's it. All right, and how do I get a win? I get the nut draw. Like, you should be able to look at this and just see that I've already won the game, right? Opponent is going first, unfortunately, because we weren't playing series. That was the other thing that was a little painful, was that um, winning the die roll over and over and over like that is painful for the other person. I really prefer a best of 3 series so that you can pass the going first back and forth. But when you try to do that in Commander, in between games 1 and 2, there's it goes to sideboarding. Even though you're in a Commander game, it tries to offer you sideboard, and then you have to click stuff, and it just becomes kind of a hassle. And so I never set the games up that way, even though I would prefer to. Anyhow, so great start here. I'm going to I Merchant Scroll. So I'm going to get Force of Will. Why am I getting Force of Will? It's because I want to protect my Dark Confidant. Basically, from this position, I have a card drawing engine, I have mana advantage, and all I want to do is just protect my position and win the game. Opponent just cycles and has no answer to Dark Confidant. So I get a land there. This is great. I now have Snapcaster. I can do Snapcaster Merchant Scroll. But I hold off because if my opponent makes a play here, now what I can do is I can just hard cast Force of Will, or I can cast Muddle. So I don't need to aggressively play the Snapcaster. My opponent has to do something because he's losing the game because of Dark Confidant, not because of the attack, but because of the cards. So my opponent has to be the one to act. So there's no need for me to aggressively like Snapcaster, Flashback, Merchant Scroll, cast a Brainstorm, whatever. When my opponent is the one who has to act first, I can just sit back and protect my position. And if nothing happens, it's totally fine. I don't fetch here because if I fetch and my opponent has flashes out the 3/2 that controls my search, I can't hard counter force, and then I have to actually force a will with the alternate cost. And I wouldn't be able to, because the fetch land would be on the stack. I wouldn't have 5 mana in play, so I don't want to open myself up to that. So I just don't fetch there. And yeah, my opponent realizes. So he's got 3 cards in hand, and he just realizes, like, I've got 6 cards in hand, more mana, a card drawing engine. He's got 3 cards in hand, and he just wisely scoops it up. And we move on to the next game where he beats me again. All right, so we'll run through these. And seems like an okay hand, but a risky keep. But it's nice to have a Vandal Blast and a red source early on. It's nice to have STP in case he cheats out the Gitrog. And if I can draw a black, then the Confidant's going to do some work, as we saw in the last game. Unfortunately, so he leads off with this, and I get really stupid. I have no clue why I was this dumb, but the play for me here. So I'm sitting on Mana Drain, thinking I want a Mana Drain into like what, a Liquid Metal Torque, like whatever. What I should do here is Vandal Blast at Crucible right now, Then I have swords for whatever. And then I can untap and I can sit on mana drain and play that game. But I don't Vandal Blast this thing right now, and unfortunately I pay a huge price for it. Now, the reason I need to Vandal Blast it now is that if my opponent plays Strip Mine and strips one of these lands, strips the Rogram Triome, then I've just lost the opportunity to kill the Crucible, and I will probably lose the game on the spot. So this is just horrible playing by me, and all because I drew the mana drain and then got greedy. I was fully prepared to Vandal Blast that thing right away. Now my opponent doesn't make a play here. So now let's look at the situation. Here's the other reason it's a problem. So they didn't have a strip mine, but they have a fetch land. So next turn, he's going to fetch again and again and again. So I still have to kill it. Only now my opponent will have even another chance to make a land drop and make a more threatening play that I can't mana drain unless I top deck an island. And I don't. So now I've put myself in the same position I would have been in last turn, where my mana drain shield is down, except my opponent has more mana. This is just, and has seen another card. This is just awful playing, and sometimes you just deserve to lose a game. Now, fortunately, my opponent kind of feeds me a confidant, and I get a chance to get kind of reset. Right, I'm okay wasting the Swords to Plowshares there. For one, it allows me to sit on drain here, and for two, I can snap it back if my opponent like cheats out the Get Rog. So still a little frustrated here by my lack of mana, but at least I can Mystical Tutor for Tithe and get in the game that way. Opponent goes for a Sylvan Library, and I'm thinking, well, I want a Mystical Tutor Tithe and then just Portable Holdout rather than mana drain it. But I decide I'm going to mana drain it because I can mana drain into Torque, and I may not have another opportunity. And what I can do with this mana is I can tithe into Torque Confidant and kind of develop my mana and get some cards flowing. So decide to go this route with it. And as you can see, so I've now got, I'm in a decent position. I still have Snapcaster for Snap Drain or Snap Sword. So I'm feeling like I'm okay, or even Snap Mystical Tutor if I have to. Of course, if my opponent had like Necropotence here, then I just lose. But instead, Death Cloud. Of all freaking things. I thought I was getting mind twisted, and I was like, well, that sucks, but I'll be fine because I have Dark Confidant. But Death Cloud kills my mana and my Dark Confidant and takes a card out of my hand, which really stinks. So I need mana, so I'm actually going to have to let the Portable Hole go. And then here I had a complete brain fart. So the correct play for me here is slam Karn, plus it up, and say go. Instead, I have a total brain fart, and I think because I just had the ability to play Snapcaster Mana Drain, so I'm thinking I still have that ability, and then I realize I don't have it, and I've completely wasted this turn. And he plays Get Rog, and yuck! I have to Snap Plow the thing instead of Snap Drain. I'm still in the game, but it's worse. All right, so now I'm gonna get the Karn down at least. Get my 2 points of beats in. Opponent plays Pithing Needle on Karn and another Void. Whenever a player casts a spell, counter it unless they pay 3. So now I have a 4 casting cost Sensei's Divining Top. All of these plays up here, a series of very minor decisions that could have been made better. And adding insult to injury, I do not strip mine my opponent's Bayou here, which is a huge mistake. All right, so I'm going to pay for this and just take a peek and get some more mana on top of my deck. And I'm allowing, look at this. And Brian pointed this out afterwards. He said, if you'd strip mine his Bayou, he can't even make this Grim Monolith play right here. I would have bought myself so much time because effectively my opponent has less land in play. Now it turns out he has the Overgrown Tomb, so he would have been able to make the play. But even so, like every land I take away potentially is massively impactful and should have been done. And remember, the Grim Monolith, unless he gets rid of Karn, it's not doing anything anyway. So even though I did let him make the play last turn, and you might be able to justify it, definitely not stripping here is not justified. My opponent has 3 less lands than you see. So he only has 3 lands. So if I strip mine, he only has 2 mana, which means if I don't strip mine here and my opponent top decks Necropotence, he can cast it. If I strip mine, he can't. Huge difference, right, in outcome. Instead, I just keep screwing around with with this. Now, of course, by not stripping, I do have the ability to hardcast to force a negation here. So, there's some thought behind it. It wasn't just totally stupid. Of course, I have to do it now, though. So, otherwise, if I let him have the Maelstrom Pulse, I think we've got a problem here. And now, like, look at this. I have nothing else I'm doing here. I've got mana on top. Like, use the strip mine. There's even a map there. I can play the map, and finally, I finally do it, right? I can play a map and then go get Wasteland here. But instead I get Saga. I think this isn't crazy to use Saga to get mana to work under the Nether Void, but it does kind of keep my opponent in the game a little bit. And here he goes with his mana ramp there. And so I've got a muddle I'm sitting on. Got some robots I can make, which is good. Also keep in mind, I do have Karn in play. I can Liquid Metal Torque something and make it an artifact, and then it doesn't work. It loses activated abilities. So if he does play anything with activated abilities, I can kind of like shut it off during his upkeep. Well, normally, excuse me. This, however, does say non-land, and that's land, so not gonna work. So I make a construct, and you'd think like I'd be okay here. I'm playing around Void. I go get Dak Faden, and this is the final like kind of straw and mistake. So I go get Dak Faden. So why do I go get Dak Faden here? Well, what I was thinking is I would get Dak Faden. Reason being, I'm expecting Getrog to come down, and then he doesn't know what I got. So of course I play Dak Faden. I have enough mana to do it. I torque his Getrog, steal it, and then from there I'm probably going to win the game. Unfortunately, my opponent decides not to play along with my plan. The correct answer here would have been to go get Wasteland, or even at any point in this, I could have gotten Crucible and then just sealed this game up by strip mining my opponent under another Void and just winning the game on the spot. But I'm playing terribly, and my opponent plays not Gitrog Monster, but Null Rod. I just don't bother using the top because I just draw it anyway. It doesn't really. I guess I could have used it only because of Dak Fade, and it would have been Dak Fade and Fuel. So in hindsight, that is a bit of a mistake. I mean, the construct still gets to hit harder, but and I'm I'm one mana shy of playing a Rift or Winter Orb. I can't play anything right now, and now my opponent just completely dominates the game. So down comes Gitrog. I still can't play anything. Gitrog starts Gitrogging. I still can't play anything. It's now just tutoring. Plays Godfrey's statue. All my spells cost 2 more to cast, and so now in order to play anything, a 0 mana card now costs 5 mana, right? So I don't even have 5 mana, so game's over. So foolishly, a series of bad decisions compounding upon themselves did cost me that game. But you can kind of argue them, and this is the problem you can get into. You can kind of argue some of the choices that I made, like from a different perspective. You can say in hindsight, yeah, there were definitely mistakes. But it's games like that that can really do what I was talking about before and set you on a path where you think that you're the master of the universe and you've lost because of your own mistakes. And then you can be so hard on yourself that it's hard to get back into the game. And that actually, I played a few more games. I lost a few more games, and then I just got frustrated. I played a couple more and just logged off. It's like 5 in the morning at this point when I'm playing. So it didn't help that I was tired, but that's copium, right? So anyway, sign in a new game, get out there, do all right, win a couple against Simon Donkey here, lose one immediately, win one, win a couple more, and then have another win-loss exchange, and then I just take some time off, go back, rebuild the deck, and then end up doing pretty well for the most part after that. Just the one loss against Hoodman here. And so, oh, and Necros. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Oh, and Master of Nature. So there were three losses hiding on the 15th, but 5, 10, 15, 20, so 3 and 23 or so. I think that's pretty good, right? It's gotta remind yourself, like, you gotta remind yourself that that the losses, it's easy to obsess over the losses, but you gotta stay focused on what the game's about. So that's me. That's where I'm at. I apologize for the delays. I promise I'll get you some games. I'm waiting. I'm really waiting to do a series of games. I want to get the new Triome in because right now every time I draw this thing or I have to search for it, I'm just like annoyed by the card, like just really annoyed by it. I've also added more black cards, so it's hurting me even more now. You see, I've got 6 white cards and 9 black cards. Nice. But anyway, quite a few more black cards. So the fact that Triumph doesn't produce black is like even more painful right now. So anyway, looking forward to that. That's all I've got today. I realize it's a long video and it was a lot of talking and not much gameplay. And then of course the gameplay that I did have was mostly me losing. So it's very different from the kind of videos I usually produce. But I thought that I would just kind of talk to you about it and let you know that you know this is part of Magic as well, and it's definitely a part of gaming. And all I can say is stick with it. If you're on the learning curve, you will get better. Your wins will go up. But if you hit that point where you're starting to feel like you should be winning and you're starting to get those losses, try not to give up. Um, it happens to everybody. It happens to me. It happens to Brian. It literally happens to everybody. Uh, Take a step back, reevaluate, figure out if it's the deck, figure out if it was your play. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's neither. And that's the secret. Remember, sometimes you're just going to lose. Sometimes they just go first turn, get Rock Monster, and then you're going to lose, right? It's the way that the game works. Unfortunately, with Lotus around, it happens way too often, but that's a conversation for another time. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.